All right, we're back for another episode of Quick Takes with Tom and Jake. And I wanted to try something a little bit different with this episode. I kind of actually got the idea from another filmmaking podcast called Barstool. They got like a film podcast. I thought it's kind of fun. The hosts each week kind of share a hot take, maybe something that has a little bit of an unpopular or an opinion that maybe, something a little spicy, where maybe some people are like, oh, damn, like that's his position on that. So us having a podcast called Quick Takes, I thought it'd be kind of fun to start with a hot take. So I don't know if one comes to mind for you. I thought of one that I could kind of, riff on. But yeah, maybe I'll start with you, Jake, if you got one.
No, you go.
Okay.
Maybe I
Cool.
didn't come in prepared for this. So, but maybe hearing yours, I'll think of one.
So, okay, I'll just kind of go right into it. I think the hot take I have is I think streaming companies, this is actually not even a take, I think it's just fact, are struggling. And I think there's going to be a future not too far off from now where you're going to see streamers start to merge. Like you're going to probably see Peacock and Paramount merge. I really do feel like we're kind of like there's almost like a return to normalcy where I feel like streaming kind of was the like outlier, like, oh, it's different than cable. It's funny. I feel like we're kind of about to see something like where they all start to come back together. And I think this is also on the heels of like a lot of the negotiations and SAG and the writers. Like I know a lot of those negotiations are costing these studios a lot. And I know they're jacking up their prices. I know subs are like lower than they've ever been. So maybe this isn't a hot take. It's more of a prediction.
I keep getting notifications that like your price of your Apple subscription or Netflix subscription or Disney, they're all going up. I'm like, dude, I'm just getting hit with a wave of prices going up. Yeah.
It's crazy too. I remember when Disney first came on the scene in like the pandemic, it was like $5.99. And like historically over the last 2 or 3 years, it's like tripled in price. I think it's like climbing up into like the 12 to 15. So it's like that only like, I think, I feel like the writing's kind of on the wall. I would not be surprised if I actually read that Disney just bought the remaining shares of Hulu, which I think was owned by Comcast. Jeez. So now Disney and Hulu are one thing.
Fully.
So yeah, it's only going to I think start to get more and more
consolidated. So what's the take though? What's the hot take?
My take is I feel like, I guess it's more of a prediction, but I do think in the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to see a lot of streamers. The ones that are on your TV and your phone right now, half of them are going to be on there and they're going to be merged. Yeah. Just how like HBO rebranded as Max. You're going to start to see these things combine. And I don't know. I think we're kind of, I think streaming is going to go through like a little bit of a rough patch this next year. So just my, kind of take prediction for the week.
I don't think you're wrong. My hot take is it's fresh on my mind because I just watched the movie The Killer, David Fincher's new film. And I guess this will be my hot take. The fight scene in The Killer was one of the best fight scenes I've seen out of any movie in a long time. And it's not even an action film, and Fincher's not even an action film director. And I feel like that fight scene was dope. He did a better job directing an action scene than most action directors do. I want to see just a straight up action film by David Fincher now.
I know, because so much of Fincher are these like slow burn, wide tripod shots that like really are like so Fincher. And on that note, I think the only asterisk, because I actually agree with that take. I don't think that's actually too spicy. I think the only thing where I'd put an asterisk next to that is I think John Wick kind of, in my opinion, is pretty grail in terms of fight choreography. But dude, we both watched The Killer because we're like, dude, on this next pod, we're both like Fincher stans. I love David Fincher. I will say though, I guess to riff on your hot take, I don't put Killer in top 5 Fincher for me. Maybe that's another hot take. It's good, but I mean, dude, when you're Fincher and you have catalog, like you've got Fight Club, you've got Social Network. I mean, it's just like you've got so many good. I mean, it just
feels like this happened. It feels like Netflix came to Fincher and was like, "Hey, we need a Fincher Netflix movie. What do you got?" And they were just like, "Oh, we got The Killer." Like it felt like it was a made for streaming feature film by David Fincher. Like pretty safe, but like also it's very Fincher-esque, very good cinematography, the sound design, the attention to detail. But it wasn't anything like typically his films are like, there's a very unique story with some sort of interesting twist or,
like Gone Girl case in
moment.
point.
Like,
yeah.
And it just kind of felt like it was following these safe rules. It's a guy out for revenge. He kills these people, and then you're kind of left at this climax moment, and it's like, oh, it's over? The movie's over?
I know. I was like, dude, I was kind of thinking when he was like in the Bahamas with this girl at the end that the girl was going to look over and like she was a double agent or something. I was like, oh, that would have been sick. But they're just like chilling in the sun. Okay, so here's one thing, and then we'll actually get into our actual quick take of the day. But this being a filmmaking podcast, I think it's fun to talk about films that inspire us that we just saw. And yeah, we both saw The Killer. I think that this film, I mean, it's easy for me on the sidelines as not being involved in this to like have my own opinions, but I think something that would have, in my opinion, strengthened the film is the main character, Michael Fassbender, had all these little unique, almost like ritualistic OCDs where like he would press play on his music. He would put in his thing. Like even like the first 10 minutes, he's like rolling out that little cloth so he can put his sniper on it. He had like all these little quirks, or even like spraying the sink. I think it would have been really cool if they had like stylistic inserts. So as he's pushing play on the iPod, it's like click, click, and like using these close-ups to like draw attention to like this guy's weird idiosyncrasies, or I don't know how you pronounce it, like all of like his weird little quirks. Yeah, like I thought that would have been a really cool way to like reinforce that this main character has all these little like fail safes. And remember, he's even in his little VOs like, don't improvise, stick to the plan. Like you can tell he's very regimented. It would have, I think, benefited from close-ups that like showed his regimented like kind of mindset. I don't know. I was watching it kind of wanting that. So I don't know if you agree or disagree.
Nonetheless, very much enjoyed it. Chanel really liked it. Yeah, it was a good movie. Very good movie. Very good.
So, I guess to pivot to our actual quick take for the episode. I mean, I feel like you on social media have been sharing a lot about just transparency in just, the revenue of the companies, the revenue of your own personal income. And we also want to just get back to this being a pillar of entrepreneurial advice. I think when we set out to make this podcast, we didn't want to just have your run of the mill, like talk about movies, talk about cinematography. We wanted to weave in some of our own knowledge and sensibilities from us actually building like several companies. So this episode is a return to form. We're going to be talking about entrepreneurial, basically talking about investments, like good investments, bad investments. I think I have to put in a legal disclaimer. This is not financial advice, but this is like, I think from our insight, just our perspective. And mind you, I think take it with a grain of salt. This is just our perspective on quite a few things. So I don't know if you want to tee it off. I feel like, if you have anything you want to kind of start with, and we can kind of take it from there,
Yeah. I mean, like most of our podcasts, like we don't have a game plan going in other than to talk about the topic, but I feel like, just to further on what you just said, I think we're in a very unique position that a lot of maybe other filmmakers or people within our industry aren't, or at least haven't shared publicly. And, us as filmmakers, we started a variety of filmmaking companies from, Tropicolor, Prism Lens Effects, film studios, on top of, having a production company and still being freelance and whatnot. And I just feel like there's so much information out there on YouTube and podcasts where it's like, you hear the story of how the DP came up and got this job and made a career for himself, and cool. And then you have like, oh, this movie was great. Here's a review. Kind of like how we were just talking about at the beginning. Like, here's our takes on this movie, and this is what they could have done better or different, or like, here's our thoughts. And, I think what people have loved about this podcast so much from our early episodes is just the business advice, the business insight, because there is more to life than just filmmaking and being on set. And also, how do you set yourself up in the future as a filmmaker? Because realistically, if you're a cam op, or something of that nature, are you really going to be, or do you want to be 60, 70 years old having to work a job, like having to be on set, or even 50? Like, what if you start a family and it's like, dude, I want to be home with my family, but I'm dependent on this check to go be away on set for 5 days a week running the show. And, just giving people insight and advice beyond just like, here's how to light a scene, or here's how I did this, or here's how I landed this job, and giving people insight into investments and how they could invest in their future or invest as a creative, as a filmmaker to set themselves up. And, I feel like both me and you have, made some smart investments or have invested in real estate or just even investing in ourselves or investing in our businesses. And so, yeah, I think there's a myriad of things we can talk about. And maybe if we talk too long, we'll split this episode up into 2 episodes, because that's what I think we both want this podcast to be, is more like kind of quick takes. So you're not having to listen to a 3-hour podcast, but,
yeah. For sure.
I guess for me, I don't know if you want to get into anything, but I guess for me, the very first thing I'll say is, in terms of real, like my first big investment outside of like, oh yeah, I'm going to buy a camera as a filmmaker to be a filmmaker or cinematographer. It's like, those are like those filmmaking investments, right? You're investing in your job, your career, you buy a camera, you buy lenses, to build a career. And then once I kind of had a career going for myself in terms of like a big growing YouTube channel, I was making money as a director and as a DP. It's like, okay, what's one of the next things I can do to kind of invest into my future? And that's in 2025, when I was like making good money from YouTube and I'd saved up a bunch of money. I bought my first house, which I turned into an Airbnb, which ultimately like allowed me to, make some good money every month, set that aside and roll it into my next property and next Airbnb. And I bought another house. And so that was kind of the start, is like, I was able to build a career for myself and save up some money. And instead of just like blowing it on more gear or a set of lenses, and I was like looking forward to, okay, what can I do right now that's going to help with, setting up myself securely in the future? And it started with kind of that first house and then rolled into a bunch of other different things.
But
yeah,
I think I want to add to that. Like, this isn't like a pod where we're going to be like, don't buy gear, buy a house instead. Because I realize like that's just going to like alienate so many people who are filmmakers. Are like, wait, I need gear to like make a living, which I think is super valid. I think I want to define that a bit further. I think there is a law of diminishing returns. The law of diminishing returns means there's like a curve, right? At a certain point, you spending more money on stuff is only going to make a very marginal difference. The first $5,000 or $10,000 you invest into your camera, your lenses, your mics, your lighting, that's going to make an instrumental difference. But from $10,000 to $50,000, maybe you've gained a little bit more low light, Ks, maybe some higher resolution raw. Like, are those small marginal differences going to make a big difference? So I think what we're trying to kind of emphasize is, I think a lot of people get to that point where they've got their video clients, maybe their director doing music videos. They've got a good little wind in their sail and they're starting to make some money from these jobs, from these weddings, from whatever you're doing. And that's kind of where I think we want this to be of value. If you're sitting on some amount of money, the instinct might be like, oh, well, I'll buy the newest gimbal or the newest this. That's only going to allow me to scale further. And to be completely honest, I actually feel like that's kind of a misnomer, because honestly, at a certain point, like it's kind of freeing when you can make money that's not tied to you being on set. Obviously, we love being on set, but when you can, obviously with the strikes and stuff going on, when there's a week that goes by or a couple weeks that go by and you're not getting called to work and you're not on set, you're not making any money. So ideally, hopefully some of what we're talking about can be of value. If like, not to say you have to go jump into real estate. I understand putting a down payment on a house is maybe like an end goal, something you can like North Star work towards, but there's definitely other things I think you can kind of invest in. And that's what maybe we can talk about that allows you to make money on that's not tied to you like being physically on set. You know what I mean? So
yes. I mean, I think a good example of that for us is like our film studios, right? Let's just bring it back to that. So we have, let's say, I think 6 different studios right now between them all. And let's just say they're each booked. Like, I know the other week they were like, each one of them was like booked all week long, multiple days, all that stuff, right? Let's just say all 6 of them are booked at $1,000 a day, for that one day of that week. I mean, that's $6,000 that we're generating in revenue, that we do not have to do essentially an ounce of work for. The work's already been done, right? We invested our time and our money into building out the location, but then
And the
once it's all
systems in
set
place
up,
to manage it and stuff. Yeah.
right? But once it's all up and running, it's like essentially we can make, anywhere from $2,000 to $15,000 in a day between the different studios if they're booked, and that's not me or you having to lift a finger. And so same thing even with my rental properties that are long-term rentals, or when they used to be Airbnbs, now they're long-term rentals. It's like that is another investment that someone else pays the rent. They live there. It's not like I'm having to go work a job to pay, or to make that money. And so to have a property that, actively and passively like makes me $2,000 a month. It's important to try and invest into things that can actively work for you and be an asset that's making you money while you're not having to physically be there or do the work.
Yeah. And let me kind of
like, what are some of those things?
Oh, sorry. And also for those watching and listening, this new format, there is sometimes a slight delay. So if we kind of step on each other, we're still kind of figuring it out. But I guess to kind of elaborate a little on your point further, I think a way that you should think about money, and I think it's something that really unlocked a lot for me, like switching the mindset is, more so now than ever, especially if you're a viewer or a listener in the United States, like it's no secret that the economy is crap. And right now, I think inflation right now is pacing around like 8 or 10%. And some people are like, oh yeah, the gas is more expensive, eggs are more expensive. They don't really understand, I think, for the most part. But when you actually think about it, what like inflation really means is like the buying power of your money sitting in an account is losing money. And I think just to like make things even, if I give you $100 and that you put that into a bank account, a savings account, if I call you up in 1 year and say, hey, you saw that $100, right? That $100 technically in a year from now would only have the buying power of like $92 because it's actually like losing 8%. So you might think, oh, I just made all this money from this feature, this commercial, this huge block of weddings I shot. This is where I think being smart with where you put that money, because just simply leaving it in a savings, it is actually losing money every year it sits in there. So I think the next thing is like, oh, well, maybe I'll buy a camera or something. And that, if we're talking that inflation, your dollar is going down by 10% on average a year due to inflation, putting that money in an asset like a camera is arguably one of the worst investments, with the caveat of maybe you have a rental business and it's going to get plugged into like a system where you can rent it out daily. Right. But if you're just like a freelancing DP director who just wants to have a camera or wants to have an Alexa, which there's a lot of people on the internet doing that, cameras depreciate by about 30% a year. So if you buy a $100K fully tilted out, Alexa mini package, and a year from now you tried to sell it, if you bought it at $100K this year, literally within 1 calendar year, it's already worth like 65, 70K. So that's where I think crazy. You as a filmmaker should really think about where you're putting your money so it can work for you opposed to against you. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people think that they want to graduate with a camera package, and it's a bad investment in my opinion,
Yeah. I mean, that's why you've been notoriously much more over the years like a gearhead than I have been, but like for as much work as I've done as a DP, a director, owning production company, etc., like I have a very minimal amount of gear. I just never saw the need or desire to be purchasing gear all the time and always upgrading. And it's just not, I was always rather willing or wanting to put my money into investments that could, grow in value, or what we were just talking about is make money while I'm essentially sitting on my ass. And so like I think one of the big first things that I realized is after the first 2 properties that, I put 20% down on these homes. So I think at the time, one of them down payments was like $60,000. The other one was like $45,000. And, actually, let me backtrack a little bit. So the very first house I bought, I put 20% down. It was $305,000. It was like a $60,000 down payment. That was money that I saved up for my YouTube channel. I never spent. I was smart with my money. I knew like, hey, this isn't going to last forever. I'm not going to be making money on YouTube forever. I didn't go out and willy-nilly blow it on cars, watches, jewelry, clothes, camera gear. I was smart. I saved. I was able to buy my first house. I turned that house into an Airbnb, like just kind of by accident because I was going back to LA for work. And my mom told me to throw it on Airbnb, and it just started booking out like crazy. And all the money I made from that every month, which would range depending on the month from $1,000 to $3,000 a month, like making that was like profit. I would save that. And over the course of that year, I'd saved up another, $50,000. And I used that money to put the down payment on the second house. So now I have 2 properties within 2 years that make me money passively and are paid. The mortgage is paid for by the people that rent it. And that kind of opened up my eyes to just like in, those 2 years to investments and long-term. And during this time, those properties had also risen in value. So I also had equity in these properties. And I was just like, okay, that's, I think, the moment where my eyes opened to more than just, oh, cool, let me go DP a job, do this, do that. Like I started thinking bigger picture long-term. And then what changed it even more is I realized we were on a shoot, we were doing a music video, and I remember just being like there, dang, we're paying $300 an hour to be here. And I was like, I can't even get $300 a night at my Airbnb. I was like, I need to do a film location. And I actually sold the very first house I bought, and it had risen like $80,000 in value within those 3 years that I had it. So not only did I get my down payment of like $60,000 back, I got another, let's call it $70,000, $65,000 after, different fees and taxes and whatnot. And I put all that money into buying the Honeymoon Inn in LA and turned it into a film studio where we were charging $250 to $300 an hour and, making anywhere from probably around $30,000 a month, just renting it out for film shoots. And that was another light bulb moment of like, oh, screw rental properties, Airbnbs. Like I need to be doing film studios. And then open the Eclectic West. And then me and you opened the Barracks, which led into so Honeymoon. It's just like you kind of have to just recognize the opportunity as it comes and see it and understand. It's tough. It's like, it's not something you can really teach. It's just, I kind of saw these moments of opportunity and I was able to capitalize on them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And for anyone like listening, who's like maybe a videographer, filmmaker starting out, I realize that this is something that's like, you can't just like wake up tomorrow like, all right, well, I want to buy a house. Like this is just something you could like work towards. So like as you stack, save, you're working, like know that that is a viable option. And to kind of echo on that further, even though like the economy is absolutely crap at the date of this recording, which is November of 2023, property value on average goes up about 14% a year. So to make things easier, if you buy $1 million house in 1 calendar year, it's going to go up $140,000. Like that's crazy. Like literally even just investing in the S&P 500, which for those of you like who are, I want to maybe dabble in stocks, even the return on the S&P 500 is like 8 to 10%. So you're barely just outpacing or just pacing inflation. So it's like your money's not even really doing anything at that point. So like, I think in my opinion, like unless you could use lenses or a camera and a pre-existing ecosystem rental house where you can churn and rent those things out, I really do think real estate is a great investment. I will say though, I want to share a few things I learned buying my first house, because I think when you buy real estate, there's a lot of like, oh dang, I have to pay that. And like those things aren't, I learned those literally, I wish they taught this shit in high school. It's funny how you learn these things firsthand. Like we learn all this garbage stuff and like never learn how to like do our taxes, and maybe that's a side tangent, but like the things I think you should kind of expect depending on where you're buying your house is, first off, if you don't put 20% down, just to make things easier, if you're buying $100,000 house, which I don't know where that would be, but if you are, to make things easier, if you don't put 20% down or $20,000 down, you like say you only want to put like 15%, you get hit with this thing called PMI. And I forget what PMI stands for. It's basically an insurance that the bank...
Mortgage insurance.
Yeah, I don't know I didn't know if it's like an acronym for something. Like, maybe it's personal mortgage insurance probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
But basically the bank's like, hey, like you're not putting 20 down, so we want you to get an insurance policy on yourself. And it's basically the bank kind of protecting themselves if you like back out, since you have like less equity in the house. So until you have crossed the threshold of 20% equity, which happens month over month, you have to pay this additional PMI. So I mean, that it's just something to expect, because you might be like, well, I only have enough to put 10 down. That's all good and great. Just know, like, when you only put 10 down, your monthly payment's going to be out of control, because most mortgages are on like a 30-year fixed. So if you don't put a giant chunk of money down, that 30-year fix is going to be broken up into like larger monthly payments, and then the PMI. So something just to factor in, like, yeah, obviously when you're like buying a house, like this is something I learned like kind of the hard way. I did 20 down, so I didn't have to do the PMI, but like there are quite a few like closing fees and all these other like things that definitely do like kind of creep up on you. So I don't know. I mean, you've definitely bought more properties.
Yeah, I just want to bring it back to also, it's like by no means are like me and Tom like experts in real estate investing or investing in general, right? And we're going to get into more topics about investing rather than just real estate. So I don't want people listening thinking like, oh, they're just going to talk about buying homes and properties, because it's only a small portion. But both Tom and I were in the same position that probably many of you guys listening are, like broke college kids just moving out to LA to pursue a filmmaking dream, right? So I don't want this to come off like, oh, they always had money and they're talking about buying real estate, and that's so far out of like the bandwidth for me that this doesn't apply to me. It absolutely does apply. You have to be smart with your money. And like I said, like when I moved to LA, I know your story is a little different, Tom, but for me, like I was working really, really hard in Arizona. I think I had saved up at this point like $20,000 before I moved to LA. And then I moved to LA, and after first month's rent or deposit, first and last, and then like the moving expenses, like all of a sudden I'm down to like $12,000 in my bank account. And I know there's probably still a lot of people like, damn, I'd kill to have $12,000 in my bank account. But like that was, I saved up for a long time and took that huge risk. And then from there, I just continued to, do these jobs and stack and save. I didn't, like I say, spend willy-nilly every piece of gear, upgrading my camera, or doing all these extra things where I think a lot of people now, it's just with social media, everyone's talking about gear all the time. And so it's like people are just always buying gear, upgrading the new camera. We have a friend that literally has probably, bought 5 cameras over the last 5 years, always changing cameras and upgrading. And it's like,
for sure.
Yeah. I just don't think that's a smart way of, like you said, there's a diminishing return. You can do your job with the camera you have, and you're not always needing the better, newer camera. And so I say all this to say, like, just set a goal for yourself and work towards saving that amount, and you can do it. It's just going to take some time. Yeah. We're not saying like everything that we're talking about, you need to apply to, 1 year, like make it a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. Like this is something just to give you guys something to chew on and think about.
Because something too about investing in equipment, because this episode really is just about like, where do you put your money once you start to earn it? You know what I mean? And the tricky thing about like investing in equipment is it's investing in something that's tied to you working. And when there's a pandemic, a writer strike, an actor strike, when you're out of work for several months, I mean, our buddy literally financed an Alexa Mini 35, or I think that's the new one that came out. I think his, like, after all the little accessories, I think he was like $120K into that camera package. And he was sharing with us, like, it's like, yeah, like it's a little wavy right now, like, because the payments on that are like $2,600 a month. It's like, I mean, if you're able to rent it out a handful of times a month, cool. But like, I feel like what's tricky about investing in an asset that's tied to the same industry that you work in is, like, I think COVID taught a lot of people this, is diversifying, because literally at the snap of your fingers, a variable that's out of you and mine's control can happen tomorrow. You know what I mean? And like, to have all your eggs in one basket, that I think was a very kind of like eye-opening moment, I think, for us, because we really started to double down in like our courses, obviously Tropic Color, our filters, our locations. Like, so if one thing's like having a slow month or is not quite performing the way we want it to, like having kind of multiple horses in the race kind of ensures you a victory no matter what. You know what I mean? Where if you have all your things on one, it can get a little wavy if that doesn't really end up panning out. So yeah.
Yeah. Speaking on just further like investments in that way beyond like just real estate and stuff. I know there's a couple more things I want to touch on, because I know someone asked, or a couple people asked questions pertaining to investing into film properties. And so I know I talked about buying a house and Airbnb and rentals and whatnot, but we haven't really touched on like the film property side of things, which I think we should get into the difference between like buying and owning one versus like renting, because we have both, right? Like I have bought and owned the Eclectic West, but we also have a lot of studios where we pay rent and we're leasing and we don't own, and the difference between those investments, but also maybe the upfront investment into what it costs to get those going. I don't know if we want to get into that, or if we want to talk about, like, I know Prism for you was a big investment, one, financially, but initially financially, and two, just personal time wise, like, because beyond investing, there's financial investing, but then there's your time investment too. And Prism was something we started working on right in that cusp of like me starting Honeymoon and Eclectic, and then we started fudging around the ideas of like the mountable prisms, and then you really went to town to figure out like how do I mount this triangle prism or drill glass, and then you took a pretty big leap in like personally investing, your time to figure that out, and then us coming both together, time and financially, to get lease the warehouse, build all the materials and the systems around like what it took to like get Prism up and running.
I think any investment, if it's investing in, I mean, like we said, real estate, investing in a location, or investing in maybe yourself or an idea, you have to believe in it. You know what I mean? Because for a long period of time, looking back, that was actually just so insane. There's so much in my brain now where I have all these little checks and balances. Back then, I just didn't have those. I just kind of leaped in, and we've said it on the pod, jumping off a cliff and building the parachute as you fall, like kind of forcing yourself to figure it out. And in that one, I was in the midst of shooting, and for me personally, I was coming off the heels of doing 2 back-to-back web series, which ate up like 8 months of my time, 5 days on, 2 days off. And I was just feeling a little burnt out, like being in this like DP rat race, just kind of always, there's a lot to that rat race that maybe we'll touch on later, but I was feeling, I guess the bigger takeaway is just burnt out and wanting to try something else. And at the same time, I'm making this decision. Tropicolor is kind of, I'm going to bed and waking up and like, oh cool, we made like $500, $1,000. It's like, wait, that's literally how much I'm making on set, where I'm like super stressed out, is like literally hitting our Shopify every day. It's like, maybe I like think about something else that we could do that's adjacent to all that. So all in all, I invested a good amount. I would say probably about like $60,000 of my own money to buy all the, the UV lighting, the lease, building all the shelves out, all the U-line stuff. And then also like probably 3 or 4 months of my time prototyping, trying different glues. And sometimes that also just doesn't work though. And I feel like if you invest in something, an idea, a location, a business, a brand, there's going to be some that fail. And don't take that as like a reason to quit. Yeah. For instance, we tried to make a stock footage website that, sunk tons of time, found a ton of people to go shoot stock footage. We even chartered ourselves and friends out to Hawaii to shoot stock footage. Never saw the light of day, never did anything. It just like wasn't the right move. So, but like, had we just sort of taken that as like, you know what, maybe we just go quit all this entrepreneurial stuff and go back to shooting. Like, I don't know. I think you kind of owe it to yourself to like see it through. And sometimes you do have to see the writing on the wall. And maybe that's a question I want to ask you, because I think some people are like, well, when is enough? Because you also don't want to quit too soon. When for you, is it like, all right, now I think we've seen it through to the fullest potential. Let's walk away, because we've done that several times for things that did not work out. What piece of advice could you give our audience watching and listening of like, you know what, maybe like, you know what I mean? Like when do you of walk away from something,
I think you walk away when it's not, when you've lost like the passion and love for it. Because if you have no passion and love for the thing that you're like trying to build and pursue or whatever, then it's going to be really hard to win and make that thing successful. And I think even from the jump, for example, with the stock footage thing, which was going to be aerial stock, like obviously it involves shooting, but neither myself or you had a passion for like drone filmmaking or cinematography, right? And we're like building this thing and we're sinking a bunch of time and money into it.
Dude, we almost bought like a $10,000 drone too.
Yeah, we almost did.
We were with our buddy in Hawaii. He's like, yo, you guys should get the Inspire too. And like, I was like adding it up on B&H. I was like, do we? We're like, all right, maybe we chill on this. And like, thank God, bro. Like, can you imagine if we bought that thing? You know?
But there was a moment where it we're spending all this time and money to do it, and it just, I think we both kind of hit a point where it's like, one, we don't have the time for this, but two, it's like we weren't waking up like, yo, excited to build the aerial stock thing. And I think that's the difference. Like with Prism and Tropic and some of the other stuff we were doing, like we woke up excited to do those things and want to push through on those. So I think, if it's not working, or if it's really hard and you can sit back and realize like, yeah, even if this kind of did take off, do I enjoy this? Is this fun? Do I want to be doing this?
Do we want to be
building this for the next 5 years? Like,
for sure.
And the answer for us was no. So it was like, cool, let's just cut our losses. And at that time
too, we were already, I think we've also shared a bit of this story, but to kind of really bring it in, because I feel like if, you're listening to this, maybe wanting to invest in yourself or a company or building a brand, I think something to consider too, and I'll use this hydro flask as an analogy. I feel like everyone has one bucket of water, and that's your time, right? And it's filled to the brim. It's 100%. And if you're all in on one thing, maybe that's DPing, you can fill one bucket to 100%. You're giving it all of your energy. And I think for us and the stock footage company is the second you start having multiple buckets of water or buckets that need your attention, need your time, it's taking away from something else that could, use that time or energy. So for us, we're at a point now where we have 6 locations, Tropicolor, Prism. We have a lot of things that require our attention. And mind you, we're only able to give each one of those things, a certain amount of our time and our bandwidth. And mind you, if you are a director, a DP, or someone who's listening to this, wanting to invest in real estate, a company, a brand, or an asset, just know that anything you're going into is going to take time. If you have a DP hustle and you're like wanting to make this thing on the side, but you're only able to give it like 10% of your bucket and the other 90 is still going to the other thing, don't expect that thing to take off. Like for me, for Prism, and for you, when you guys started to come and help me fulfill orders, I was like 110%, and I literally just stopped taking DP jobs. And I was like, I want this thing to succeed, not only because I've sunk a lot of time and money into it, but like I want to see this through. So I gave that 100% of my water in this analogy, if you're following along. So just know that anything that you invest in, you really do owe it to yourself to see it through and give it the time it deserves, because you can't just plant like a plant and expect it to grow if you don't give it water, you don't give it the attention, the love. And know that a lot of times when you start a business, they say the first 5 years, don't expect to make a cent. And I know that's discouraging. And that actually got us into some kind of muddy waters, because our company started to make a ton of money and we started to take a ton of money, and then like taxes and other logistical things happen. So like, you don't want to also squeeze that sponge too soon. As your business starts to take off, don't just wring it down to the last drop right when it gets going. Like let it grow, let it nurture, get those roots in, because there's like, I think the tendency is like, oh, my XYZ company took off. You wring the sponge, drain the account, send you a fat wire transfer. Well, now that business is literally working in first gear, it can't really grow or scale. So I know that was like kind of like a lot, but it was just kind of going on a tangent on, basically what my thoughts and perspectives, if your investment is like a business, how you should approach it,
So for you, just to poke and prod to you, like why? Because I know initially with Prism, you made the first big investment of obviously time and money, and then kind of I came into the fold and began really helping and being a part of everything. Why? What made you want to spend that much money on investing in a Prism to start, like just to get it going? Because it wasn't cheap.
No,
right?
for sure.
Like why? You had obviously saved up a lot from gigs, and it's like, why that at the time versus like, yeah, saving up for a house or buying a new, camera or lens. Like, why did you do
For
that?
sure. Yeah, I mean, I think for me at that time, and this is 2018, like end of 2018 is like when I got the lease to the first little shed that we built these things in. I was like
Dude, that
seeking
place was-
financial. Oh God, yeah, it was. We just give some context. It was in this like WeWork building where there was no roof, so technically at any moment, I always had the fear that someone could just jump over a wall and like steal everything.
WeWork is super generous. That's
Yeah.
that's giving it way too much credit.
But like
That
you know
was-
how WeWork is like a massive, probably 100,000 square foot warehouse broken into like cubicles or parcels. That's essentially what this was. But yeah, dude, it was, and we've talked about it. It was basically kind of like our Steve Jobs garage moment. He started building those Macs in his garage, and that was basically our kind of beginnings. That's just what we could afford.
Yeah.
But yeah, to answer your question, I think for me, I was seeking financial freedom that wasn't tied to working on set. And I don't mean for me to come off as jaded, like, oh, fuck set work. I love being on set. It's so refreshing. New location, new people, new creative every day. But I think I'd be lying if I didn't say there's a lot of stress that comes with that. I think anyone driving to set right now probably has some preset jitters or anxieties. And I was feeling that, especially coming off the heels of an 8-month-long job. I was just like, my tank was empty. I wasn't really excited about it anymore. So I also, at the same time, Tropicolor was starting to pick up. We were making some good money. We put a lot of energy. I don't know if you remember that summer. We, I think we like spent a lot of time like scanning in those film and the film mats, the film grain. Like we really tried to put a lot of energy into Tropic in 2018, where we started to see some of the fruits of that hard work. So I was like, kind of had a little bug in the back of my head, like, if we could do that, just me and Jake bootstrap with this thing, well, why don't we do this other thing? And coming up, like we've shared the story a million times, but to give some context, like we were always using effects filters like on our jobs and on our music videos, and I was just kind of playing around with a couple prototypes. And yeah, I mean, it was definitely a big plunge because like literally to go and like find all these manufacturers, build the factory, find the equipment, assemble, drill, set up a Shopify, set up ShipStation and all this stuff. Like, oh my God. I mean, it was just crazy. And I'm so glad we did it because like out of all the companies, it's probably the one I'm most proud of because it's like the community that like Prism has turned into, like getting tagged on a daily basis of like people's weddings or like important moments and shoots. Like we're a part of that is really fucking cool, actually.
Well, I noticed even just watching the behind the scenes clips on the new podcast we just put out today with the the winner of the horror film contest, the behind the scenes, he's using our V&D filter on his camera.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? It's like, that's crazy. Like to just see that. And it's always cool to be, out in the wild and see our filters being used or have people come up to us and be like, yo, I love your guys' stuff. Like it's such a cool feeling. But yeah, I think with a lot of these businesses, to echo your point, like it allows us to still create, like creatively or flex our creative muscles, but in a different way. It's all still pertaining to like kind of the filmmaking industry and whatnot, but we're able to, essentially have kind of financial freedom in terms of like there's things making us money. We're working on still being creative, and we could, if we want to, we can still go work a job, but we're also making money over here and just trying to build towards setting up like, future financial freedom and success in that way. Cause it's like, I knew for me, like my family, I knew at some point I was going to have kids, right? I was getting very serious with, Chanel and I didn't want to be the dad that's like having to go to set 4 or 5 days a week and work a job. Like I want to be present. I love kids and I want to see my kids grow up. And so I know that for me was always a motivation of like, how could I be financially free and build and invest into things so I don't have to like always go work some job or travel for a month doing this travel job or this documentary or this or that. And it's like, cause I did that. I had done the ESPN 30 for 30. I had done the football show for Uninterrupted and Verizon Go. And it's like that, those are fun and cool, but do you want to do that all the time? Like, and that's the only way you can make money. Like it's brutal. It can be so tough.
For sure. And it's funny, like, so we opened up a location this year, actually. It's called Base Camp. It's a White Sykes studio in downtown LA. And I mean, I was literally there last night doing a scout. which is fine. It was in the area, came down, opened it up. And yeah, I mean, it was a massive Apple commercial. And there's so many people measuring, taping. And I'm literally just kind of in the back. If they have questions, cool, they can talk to me. But I'm just trying to stay out of their way, let them like map out their shots. And I'm like looking over at the DP, and he's just like, so stressed. I'm seeing like a million people are asking him like, oh, hey, we need this insert. And I'm like looking at him, and it was like this almost like role reversal. I'm like, dude, I know exactly what's going through his head, the level of stress he probably has, the amount of budget he's working with, and the amount of expectations he's expected to deliver on, the amount of crew he's going to have to call after that scout and tell them, hey, I know you're worth this, but I only have this. The amount of rental houses he's going to have to call and be like, hey, I know this Alexa and this lenses that normally go out for $10K. I need it for $1,500. Like those conversations are not fun. Those are not fulfilling. Like that is not something I looked forward to at all. If DPing was literally just arriving on set and all the prep was done and, you get to move the light, shape, I would do that every day. But the other 95% of the logistics associated, like the kind of economy around being a DP, the prep, the negotiation, the this, that, dude, it is kind of suffocating, to be honest. And a lot of people ask me, oh, dude, I thought like even at your screening last month, a lot of people came up to me and probably still to this day think I'm a DP. Like, oh, hey, I watched your cinematography course, like huge inspiration. Like, oh, what are you shooting these days? And I'm like, oh, I actually like don't really shoot a whole lot. And like, literally what I just shared is my reason for not doing that. And it's freeing that I can, I don't know. I think you can probably relate from probably the Adidas job or some of these other jobs where it's just like the amount of stress is almost not even worth like the rate,
Converse, Converse
Converse
gig. Dude, that's that job, which the final project or video or whatever never even saw the light of day, and it turned out all right. But the amount of that was my first time kind of directing under a creative agency for a huge client where there was like a big budget and just a lot of like hoops to jump through, and it wasn't like a music video client that booked me and I'm in charge. Like I kind of am being controlled, and even though I'm the director, I'm like, I don't have my hands on the reins. I'm kind of have the reins on me, and it's like things that we had to go through from the pre-production process to all the scouts and the casting, and then on the day, like the Converse clients are like sitting back in a chair, and I go to do something, and then the creative director comes up in my head and it's like, hey, we should do this instead. We need it, and I'm like, okay, like it was an absolute nightmare of a day, and it's
dude,
like,
yeah,
that stuff is so stressful, and it's like I would much rather invest into kind of my own businesses, companies, and things that are actively, passively like making money for me, that I can choose the jobs that I want to work. Because I wanted to do that job, but there's a lot of times when you're coming up, you're just taking a job because you need the check, and it's like I'm at a point in my life where I don't want to be forced into any, like I knew I didn't want to be forced my whole life to like take a job because I need to make rent or I need that check and work check to check. And so like investing in these other things like the Prism and Tropic and the film studios and real estate has allowed me to open up the doors to like shoot and work on the projects that I really want to work on, and not because like, dude, I need to take this gig. Like I need that. I need that check for this month. And so, and then it also opens up the doors for if there's any future business ideas that I have that I want to do or pursue. It's like I'm able to do that, and it's like investing early on and saving my money to have built those things. Like now allows us to be more creatively free and work on what it is, whatever me and you want to work on, like we do it. You know what I mean? If it's hosting a short film contest, we do it. If it's going to make a short film, we do it. If it's a gig that I get hit up for, I'm like, yo, Tom, new Kyle video, let's go. We're like, cool, let's do it. If we want to build a new Tropic product, Prism product, cool, let's do it. Let's do a photo shoot at Basecamp. Let's open a new studio. Like, it's just like we get to do what we want to do, and that's super cool. And that's what investing early on allowed us to do, not just, just kind of throwing our money at gear. That's like the thing I keep coming back to is like, just because I feel like that's what everyone does. Even a guy I was talking to earlier on the podcast, he's like, yeah, I'm a total gearhead. I've like spent all my money on gear. Like, it's just like, I wish I would have early on like done more to invest instead of just like,
I think I know exactly. Earlier I was like, who is he referencing? But no, that one AC that we worked with, Oh my God, it was almost kind of comical because like we were just gabbing, shooting the shit on set. It was like, oh yeah, I've got several pre-orders on the new Raptor, and it's like, and he's an AC. It's like, why is he buying all these red Raptor cameras? You know what I mean? It's just
Dude,
I don't
know.
understand. And that's also part of the rat race of being a DP, which is a little discouraging. Is I was getting to a point where some producers, not all of them, but some of them expect or want you to have a camera package. And I remember near the end when I was kind of phasing out of shooting, I had at the time a red Epic. This is before I got like a Gemini, but like people are like, oh, well, you don't have an Alexa? Do you know anyone who has an Alexa? And like, it was just always this rat race of like having to own this equipment. And it's like, that's a massive financial investment. You know what I mean? So, And real quick too, if you're listening to this, we actually are running a Black Friday sale on Tropicolor and Prism. When starting this podcast, we don't want this to be one of those pods where the first 15 minutes are ad reads. So if anything, to support the pod by supporting our companies, small, locally run and owned film companies, which are Tropicolor and Prism, we're running a 50% off sale at Tropic, a 35% off at Prism. If you are in need of any of those products and want to support us and the pod and the companies, be sure to check that out. Links in the show notes below.
All right, so let's transition this, conversation to some hard numbers, because I feel like we've kind of talked a lot about like investing into things and the different businesses and real estate and whatnot. Let's literally give the hard exact numbers of our various investments, from real estate to the film studios, whether the ones we own or we lease, to Prism, Tropic, etc. I don't know where we want to start. I guess maybe where should we start? My first.
Yeah, I guess the locations.
Homes?
I think that would be. Or you want to do homes
locations?
First?
I'm for whatever. Yeah.
I guess I think a lot of people are probably interested in the location, so I think we could share that. You know what I mean? So I think we've shared this before, and it's funny because we look back and one of the most viewed and watched episodes is our conversation where we're talking about film locations. Subtle plug, we do have a course on Tropicolor about film locations. So if this is of any interest in a deeper, expanded conversation, it's there, no pressure. But yeah, so I think on the note of location, something to consider, and we do dive into it in that course, is the aspect of a commercial lease. And as I said earlier, you want to invest in yourself, and you want to obviously see it through. And the thing you have to factor in is with the location and a commercial lease, you actually have to see it through. You can't just bail. A lot of these commercial leases are like 3 to 5 years. And some of them are 1 year, but I'll be honest, those are kind of sketch, because if you spend a lot of money building all the sets, you could get rug pulled in a year. So ideally, you actually want 3 to 5 years, because if you, in our instance of Honeymoon, which we'll get to, probably spent close to 100 with the recent renovation, probably 150 in the full.
So let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's start. Well, let's just go in order of like how all of the locations transpired. So first and foremost, the very first film location was the Honeymoon Hideout, which was a house that I bought in West Hills. It was $735,000. I put 20% down. If you do the math, that's around like $147,000 that I had to put into the down payment. And granted, everyone's going to be like, wow, that's a lot of money. I had gotten that money through a sale of the first house that I bought. So I had gotten my down payment back. The house had increased in value, and I took all that money, which was a little less than 147, but I basically put all that money to the down payment, $147,000, 20% down. And then I would say it probably took another 50 to 70,000. I don't remember the exact number in investment to furnishing, painting, decor, and all of that, right? And then you're talking about the time investment too, because every day or month that I'm working on renovating, set decking, hunting down all these props and furniture, etc., I'm not working a job. Like I'm physically having to go hunt this stuff down and decorate and do all that stuff. So you're looking at easily a $200,000 investment into Honeymoon when I bought it. The good thing, or started that as a film location. The good thing about doing something like that where you're able to buy is you now own that property, and that money that you put down as a down payment is sitting in the house. It's not going out to a lease to rent. You don't own the building. You have equity in this property that you bought. So that there was a really good situation there where after a year of being there, we kind of ran into some issues with the neighbors, and I ended up selling the property. But in that year time frame, the house went from like $730,000 in value of what I bought it at to like $880. So when I sold it, I basically made $100K plus got my $140,000 back. And then we were able to just go lease a warehouse and rebuild in this warehouse and use all the furniture that I had already invested in and bought.
And
so yeah, maybe you want to go into the lease.
Yeah, and one of the main reasons, if people listening are like, well, why would you leave if it was so profitable? Unfortunately,
which it was.
The neighborhood it was in was like kind of a sleepier part of LA where a lot of people go to retire, have kids, that kind of thing. And when you have these massive grip trucks at 5 a.m, beep 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 down the driveway, naturally they're going to get really upset. So it ended up getting blacklisted on Film LA, where they wouldn't even issue permits to high paying clients. So like, I know you guys were having to do like covert ops, like quickly run in, close the door, no lights outside. And that, like, I know you guys were probably just leaving so much money on the table because like people were just going elsewhere. So the idea of going to Honeymoon was to go to a place where there was no curfew, there was no limits. You could shoot till 3 a.m. There wasn't any Film LA BS. And confidently, I can say after 3 years or 2.5 years of being there, we were doing just that. I mean, I think recently we just had like probably one of our best months, like a $30,000 month, which is ludicrous. And I know you were hitting maybe something close to that at the house, but it was with so much stress that your wife was having to deal with. And now I feel like it's a lot less stressful. So yeah, we migrated in 2021 to a warehouse, which, like I said, allowed us to rebuild all the most popular sets, build even crazier sets, because when you build from scratch, you could do whatever you want. You're not bound to pre-existing hallways and drywall, which is cool. But that alone, when we set out to build it, we kind of had two options. Our contractor's like, hey, I can do this with, they call it wiggle wood, which is like Luan or really thin plywood, or I can build this like a house and this thing is not going to move. And us coming up as filmmakers, me and Jake have shot in so many little flimsy sets with 1x3 and Luan, where like a C-stand bumps it and the whole set shakes. And we're like, you know what? Let's build this thing like a house. Like, we're signing a 5-year lease. I want this thing to feel, to look, and be around in 5 years. If we're going to dump all this money and setting up all these walls, furnishing, wallpaper, all this, like, let's invest in it. So that did scale the construction quite a bit, because now you're buying 2x4s instead of like little 1x3s. So the actual like set construction, I would say probably cost anywhere from like, I would think 80 to 100K in labor, 2x4s, our contractor, the wallpaper. I mean, right. And that's all, maybe also factoring in our first, last, and security, which is 77. Yeah. So 7K, which is our lease per month. And then when you sign a lease, you have to put down the first month, the last month, and then another month as a security deposit. So basically just factor in a 3X, whatever.
Yeah.
Right out the gate.
Yeah, or basically right out the gate to sign the lease, it was like, probably closer to $23,000 just to basically sign the lease and get in the building. And then from there was, the build out and all of the costs associated with that, from moving all the furniture to Honeymoon to building this thing from the ground up, all the wood, set design, paint, everything that we did to build. And like Tom said, we I don't know the exact number offhand, but it was certainly somewhere north of 75,000 to fully build, I would say, that out from top to bottom. When you walk into Honeymoon now, that's probably what it cost us to build that out.
Yeah.
Right?
And there's been some like extra renovations. Like, I know we just this recently over the summer did like a pretty big effort to like revitalize. So it's an ongoing thing. Don't think if you're getting into a location, it's going to be a one and done and you walk away. Because when you walk away and your foot is off the gas, or in my analogy earlier, you're no longer pouring water into that cup or like putting energy into it. The sets are going to get dilapidated. People are going to leave you negative reviews on PeerSpace. Oh, hey, dirty this, missing prop, missing this. So there is like a level of attention that you need to put in it.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that attention to give it, which me and Jake do not, then you bring on a team. And our team consists of several site reps that we've hired and trained who know every nuance of the location, the parking details. They have keys. Your wife who runs it, our buddy Travis who runs our other location. So if you want to get into this, you're like, well, shit, I'm a full-time commercial director or music video DP, but I want to do this, then get a team. Because if you don't have the energy to facilitate and manage it, I would say the locations do require energy to successfully run it.
I think from the outside, I think from the outside looking in, we make it look so like effortless and seamless, and like there's not a lot of work to it, and there is a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. Like me and you do not on a daily basis run the bookings, the scheduling, site reps, and you do need people in place that can do that, or whether it's friends, family, employees.
Yeah.
So that's something that like we've never really talked about, and those are also added expenses and different things. So yeah, I think that's important to note.
The one downside to doing a commercial lease is at the end of our 5 years, I pray we can renew, but that $100K that we put into that building, if act of God, knock on wood, our landlord's like, hey, I actually do not want you guys to renew, which he does reserve that right, we would be kind of SOL. I mean, mind you, we probably recouped that money. If we're averaging like 20 to 30 a month, it only takes a few months to like be in the black, but there was a lot of our time, which is worth money. You know what I mean? Like we sunk months. Yeah. There was from, I think, February to May of 2021, we were in there every day, overseeing, building, measuring, taping, taking photo. There's a lot of that is time that we'll never get back. So that is a risky run by doing a lease, but just know like a lease also affords you more opportunity because it's a building that is a predefined, warehouse. It's like buying like a warehouse in Los Angeles is like $10 million. So it kind of affords you like a really unique shooting location where a house, which most people would be the thing they buy, that's a little bit more easy to obtain. So like a lease allows you these unique locations that otherwise would be kind of impossible to have access to.
Well, speaking to that, like you're able to get into a spot for not a lot of upfront costs because you're just paying the rent. So there's the downside of like, hey, you don't have equity, you don't own this. At the end of it, like you might have to just walk away, whether it's your choice or the landlord's choice, but it is financially easier to get into because that price point isn't 20% down on a $800,000 property. So like there's pros and cons to each, right? Like in terms of like if you're buying a property, there's going to be much more of an upfront cost or investment. But long-term wise, you have equity in that property, you own it, it's yours, there's security there. You can sell it down the road, make that money back. At least you don't have any of that, but you can get into a place for cheaper up front.
Something I would challenge you to, if this is something you're looking to explore, is I'm going to use barracks as an analogy. Barracks on average right now, there was definitely a moment where it was, it was cooking. Like, not to say it's not as hot, but I will say, I mean, it's just a fact. There's so many more people now, like opening locations on a day-to-day basis where, imagine you're one listing amongst 100. Well, we're one listing now amongst 1,000 or several thousand. So naturally traffic is going to other spots, which is fine. But right now, as it stands, we're averaging between I'd say 15 to 18K revenue. Our rent is $5,000. Our staff costs about $2,200. So after all the dust settles, there's usually about $8K profit that is split between me, Jake, and our other partner. And one thing I'll really caution you is don't just drain that net profit down to pennies, because there's going to be times. I mean, I think we can both relate. Honeymoon has had some roof water leaks. One Take has had air conditioning instances. There's going to be instances, or barracks, for instance, the roll-up door broke and we had to pay a welder and it was like a $3,000 new roll-up door. So there's gonna be rainy days where you need to have that liquid capital, or just to have that, or you're gonna have a slow month where maybe you have an off month because it's Christmas in November, and that historically are horrible months for locations because there's 2 months or 2 weeks out of November and 2 weeks out of December that most people aren't shooting. They're with their families and stuff. So having a reserve. So though we're netting 8K from barracks, me and you only take about 2, you know what I mean? Leaving a healthy amount in that account for renovations. So I guess my kind of caution is don't just drain any new business location or anything down to the studs. Always leave a healthy amount so it can grow and afford you some wiggle room if you needed to diversify or reinvest or whatever. So, and that was a lesson we learned the hard way.
I think, you're spot on with that, because there's always going to be times too, like you said, where stuff like that is going to happen, but also that you may want to reinvest and change things up. And if you don't have a nice little healthy stash that you save, you can't do anything to help the business grow because there's no money to do that. So yeah, definitely saving in that way. So yeah, that's kind of Honeymoon. in barracks. The second location was eclectic, and I kind of followed up doing, bought the property of eclectic like not 5 or 6 months after Honeymoon, because Honeymoon started doing so well. And it was kind of like this joke with my wife about like, oh, we should do another location. And I knew I wanted a desert location, and I just started pinch zooming, found this property, and I bought it with under a week. But hard numbers, just to be totally transparent, I bought it all cash. It was only a cash offer that they were accepting. And I was able to basically buy the land, the 40 acres, for $135,000 cash. I bought it. I probably sunk another total between like the airplane sets, fixing it up, cleaning it up, trash removal, building the convenience store. Let's call it another probably $60,000 at least, in building sets and just cleaning it up. And then there's still things to this day that I'm having to pay for. Like when I bought the property, unfortunately, the guy before me who had built it or sold it never got the structures that were there on the property permitted. So I'm now having to go back and retroactively pay like probably 10 to 15K in just permit fees. And then the electrical there is like pretty much completely shot now. And so I have to get 2 new electrical panels put in and installed, and those are probably going to be 8K each. So it's like there's always going to be other costs and expenses and things. And but yeah, I would say probably all in investment wise money that I've sunk into buying the property and getting it up and running, somewhere between 175 to 200K of my own money to get that. But something that's great about that, I own that property outright. I don't have a mortgage on it. It has doubled in value since I bought it in 2019 or 2019. And that's an asset that is, ever growing in value. It's making me money. It's a place that we can use for our businesses, for different shoots and short films or whatever we want to do. And I can hold on to that, and I could either sell it as a business one day, or which would honestly probably be smarter for me is to, turn around, and if I wanted to like step out away from it one day, whether that's tomorrow or 10 years from now, I could probably turn around and sell it for more as a business than I could just the actual land itself. So if I were to ever sell it, which I don't plan on or want to, that's what I would probably do. I would find someone who would want to buy the business versus the land. So,
I think to kind of close this episode out, because we do want to keep these quick takes, I want to provide, I think, a roadmap that anyone listening or watching should at least evaluate to see what they should invest in. And I think the thing that's really helped me, and I would imagine you as well, is right now, take a moment and identify what's your unfair advantage. What is something that gives you a competitive edge in a space or a sector? Maybe you're a cinematographer and your unfair advantage is you know so much about lighting and cinematography. Okay, make a course, make a YouTube channel to promote that course, make LUTs, make something revolving the cinematography space. Maybe you're a director and you're, spending 5, 10K a week on all these locations. Cool. Maybe some of what we have talked about could be your unfair advantage. You know what artists like in locations. You know all the treatments you're pitching, what clients like. So open a location that uses your knowledge, that kind of gives you that competitive edge. I think identify what that unfair or competitive advantage you have in your field is, and build something around that and invest your time and energy in building that up. For me, I know nothing about woodworking. I would not just randomly make a woodworking business. I don't have a competitive or an unfair advantage in sawing or making pottery or anything. Like, my unfair advantage is I've gotten very good at building e-commerce brands. I have a background in cinematography and camera operating. Like, those are my strengths. So your whatever it is, I imagine you're listening to this seeking some sort of inspiration. Whatever you seek or want to do, take a moment, take out a legal pad, go full analog, and write down what do you know a lot about? And that's where you should branch out from. You know what I mean? Because I know film locations might not be for everyone. You're like, oh, well, do I open one? If you don't know much about what would make a good location, then don't. If you haven't shot at least 15 or 20 locations to know and have an informed decision on what makes it good, what makes it bad, what would be good add-ons, what's good lighting, what room. Like we had an unfair advantage because we had shot in probably hundreds of locations. So when it came to placing the window, we knew that we'd frame it up here so another crew could shoot shadow side or have top light. Like we applied our unfair advantage of being DPs and shooting in locations to building our own location.
Yeah.
But if you have zero experience in that, then yeah, I would say seek something that you're good at. I don't know if you want to echo anything I said. I think that would be how I would approach any investment.
I mean, you couldn't have said it any more perfectly. The guy I was talking to on the podcast earlier, you know, he was blown away by basically this information I was sharing about like the film location. He's like, man, I need to start a film location. And it's like, you can hear and see these numbers, but if that's not your unfair advantage, if you don't have knowledge in that space, if that's not a passion of yours, then you shouldn't pursue it, right? So for example, he has 6 to 7 sets of like lenses and vintage lenses and has them placed at rental houses and rents them out and stuff. Like, to me, I'm thinking like, oh, that's a cool idea, I could do that. But like, I'm not a gearhead. I don't know much about lenses. I don't know the first thing about rental houses. Even when we were doing production jobs, I never dealt with rental houses. I always had other people do that for me. So like, that would be very naive and dumb for me to try and just go into and start a business around like buying and renting out lenses when that's like not really my thing. And so yeah, 100%. That just echoes exactly what you said. It's like, find out what you're good at, write down what you're good at, what you're passionate about, see what things are matching and connecting, and start writing down potential business ideas that favor those things, that are connected to those things. And then it makes it easy to vertically integrate everything that you're doing, you know what I mean? And cross promote via your different, things that you do. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just kind of echoing what you said. You said it really, really, really well.
Yeah. And I think if you create or invest in a business or an idea or yourself in this new venture that you're looking to maybe put some income or time and energy into, if it's something that's adjacent to what you're already good at or is the thing you're good at, then doing it is not going to feel like a chore. If it's something that's kind of a couple degrees away from what you naturally do, you're going to I feel like naturally it's going to be like, well, I'm not. It will just naturally start to, I think, feel like an obligation or, I got to do this, where I sometimes catch myself working till like 10 or 11 on just different things that, editing this podcast or working on some Tropicolor stuff. And it's tricky because it doesn't feel like a job or a chore. And it's, I guess, gotten me into a little bit of trouble because I sometimes work a little longer than I should. But it's case in point that I found something that I actively enjoy. And it's not like just like dragging my feet all day because I got to do this thing I don't like to do. So, I will say to echo your point again and add kind of one last tidbit is like, I don't want everything that we said in this podcast to come off like everything we've kind of invested in, we've won. There's been numerous accounts on my accord that I've invested into other people or other people's companies and have lost everything I've invested. I don't want to like name names or people's companies, but there's been a handful of times where I've invested 15,000 into this person's business, 30,000 into this business. And like, it wasn't something that I built or created. I was either kind of being brought into the fold or they needed outside investment, and I've lost all that money. And then to another point, like there has been instances where me and you have started something, whether it was Buff Beans, Aerial Stock, etc., like where we did start sinking personal and financial investments into those things and then realize like, this just isn't it. And we've taken a loss and had to cut our losses, and we've lost that money and time. So we have taken L's, even to one of our film studios, which like was like it was called Bubblegum for those who followed, like kind of had to, after a year, cut our losses with that one. So yeah, I mean, it's going to take trial and error, and you learn something from each experience of like trying to do that thing. But I will say with each of those moments in businesses in which we did fail, I feel like we were trying to step outside of what we were really good at, what our unfair advantage was. You know what I mean? Like, we weren't drone pilots. We weren't coffee prosewers, or we weren't we tried to start a girly location. We're not a girl. We don't have girl sensibilities. Like, so it's like everything where we tried to step outside of like our secret sauce or what we know and what we're good at.
it kind of did stutter, falter, or fail.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think too, the main reason why I think we've naturally invested in our locations or our own businesses, I mean, me and Jake have put our own money into Prism and Tropic and the locations, and that's because we have a direct hand in its success. And that's why I've always been hesitant. I have like a CPA and accountant, and they're like, oh, when are we going to set up your, investing portfolio? And they keep telling me about the S&P 500, which for those that don't know, it's basically an index of the top 500 companies from like Apple to Tesla to 3M. And it's basically as they do better, you do better. And what I find, what's hard to get attached to that is I'm putting money into something that I have zero control over. Tomorrow I could wake up and those companies collapse. I mean, I know that's a little rare for the S&P 500, but for stocks in general, maybe you're a little bit more aggressive and you want to invest in like Tesla or Ford or Microsoft. You could wake up tomorrow and that investment could flop. It could be cents or pennies, and it's not to my control. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have a direct correlation to the success of that thing I'm investing in. But when you invest in yourself or your own brand or your own location or your own thing, the only reason it would fail is because you let it fail. And I like the idea of the things I put my money in, I have a direct correlation one-to-one to its profitability. If I sink time, energy, and money into something, I can control it. You know what I mean? So,
I mean, it's been so frustrating the times that I have invested my money into someone else's thing, like I just mentioned. And it's like, I can't do anything about it. It's like,
they hit you with a text, hey, server bills went up, we got to close it. And you're like, well, fuck. Like, what do you mean? You know what I mean?
Well, there goes my money. Yeah. So it's like 100%. And I think that's why we've always leaned into just kind of building and doing our own thing. And we've never taken outside investment, because I feel like we just like having our hands in our thing and growing our thing. And yeah, we've always invested a lot of our own time and money into all of these different businesses. And I would like to just echo that same sentiment. I feel the same way.
But yeah, I think we should probably wrap it up. I don't want this to turn into long takes with Tom and Jake. So I think this was kind of a return back to what we really enjoy talking about, which is the bridge between filmmaking and being an entrepreneur. Because I feel like it's like you hear film business or the music business. There is a business aspect to the film business. And I feel like there's not that many resources that talk about that. And there's a really cool soundbite. I think Snoop Dogg was actually on Joe Rogan talking about how when he got into the music business, he didn't understand the business and he got taken advantage of. He lost a ton of money, and he's really smart with his money now. And that's because the film business, that second word business, there is a lot of things that as creators we kind of just ignore or don't really look into until it's too late. So yeah, I hope that this podcast can be a beacon of inspiration for anyone looking to explore the business aspects of filmmaking. We don't know all the answers. We don't have all the answers. This is just a conversation of what has worked well for us. And hopefully you guys have appreciated the candid, transparent, kind of nature to our conversation. So yeah, consider subscribing. Spotify, Apple Pod, YouTube. We're trying to make this a frequent weekly thing. And, we'll continue to do this no matter what. But obviously, if you guys are watching and subscribing, it does add a little extra motivation. So I appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
And
no, it is nice to see your guys' comments. So if you're watching on YouTube, if you're still around, like, please drop us a comment. Like, let us know that you like what you're seeing, because it's like it can be very discouraging to, we love doing this, but when it doesn't feel like there's anyone watching or engaging, it's kind of like, well, why are we doing this? Like, because we're doing it for you guys. We're not doing it for ourselves. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we have all this information already. So it is, if you guys are listening, go comment on YouTube or drop us a review or share with a friend, like whatever you guys can do to help spread this thing so we can continue to talk about these things and these topics, but also get on other guests. Like, that's something we're very excited about with this new format of how we're doing the podcast, is how easily we can get any guests. And we have personally a lot of resources of some really cool people that we're going to be bringing on very soon. And yeah, if you guys have any suggestions as well, go drop a comment of who we should reach out to, and I'll go reach out to them and bring them on here and talk to them. So,
but yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate it. And we'll see you on the next one.